The people everyone overlooks are often the ones carrying the stories nobody would ever believe. At Westfield Regional Hospital, nobody paid much attention to Claire Morgan. She was 29 years old, soft-spoken, hardworking, and almost invisible in a building filled with ambitious doctors, experienced nurses, and powerful administrators. Most patients remembered the physicians who treated them. Most employees remembered the department heads who gave orders. Very few remembered the quiet nurse who worked long hours without asking for recognition. Before we continue, thank you for supporting our channel and spending time with us today. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoy inspiring stories filled with hidden truths, unexpected recognition, and unforgettable life lessons, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every like and subscription helps us continue bringing you more meaningful stories and new experiences in future videos. Now let us continue with today's story. Claire arrived at the hospital every morning before sunrise. While much of the city was still asleep, she was already preparing treatment rooms, reviewing patient charts, organizing supplies, and helping the overnight staff complete their final tasks. She never complained. She never sought attention. She simply focused on helping people. Yet despite her dedication, Claire often felt like a background character in her own workplace. During staff meetings, her ideas were rarely acknowledged. During busy shifts, more experienced employees often spoke over her. When praise was handed out, her name was usually forgotten. That morning was no different. The emergency department was crowded, and everyone seemed to be moving at twice their normal speed. Claire spent hours assisting patients, answering questions, and helping families navigate difficult situations. Several patients thanked her for her kindness. One elderly woman squeezed her hand and told her she had the gentlest voice in the hospital. Claire smiled and thanked her. Moments like that mattered more to her than awards or titles. During a short break, Claire entered the staff lounge carrying a cup of coffee. Around the table sat several nurses discussing schedules and weekend plans. At the center of the conversation stood Dr. Benjamin Carter, the hospital director. Confident and respected, Carter had built a reputation for demanding excellence. Unfortunately, he also had a habit of judging people quickly. As Claire entered the room, one nurse looked up and smiled. There she is, the quiet nurse. A few people laughed. Claire nodded politely and walked toward the coffee machine. I swear she says fewer words in a week than most people say in an hour, another employee joked. More laughter followed. Claire simply smiled. She was used to it. Dr. Carter glanced in her direction. As long as she keeps up with her assignments, I suppose silence is not a problem. The comment sounded harmless, but it carried a familiar message. Nobody expected much from Claire. Nobody saw her as exceptional. Nobody imagined she had ever done anything remarkable. After finishing her coffee, Claire quietly returned to work. Later that evening, as she prepared to leave the hospital, she opened her wallet to retrieve her identification card. A faded photograph slipped loose and landed on the pavement beside her car. Claire picked it up and stared at it for several seconds. The image showed a moment from years ago that she rarely allowed herself to think about. She slowly returned the photograph to her wallet, unaware that somewhere across the city, a convoy of black vehicles was already moving toward the hospital, carrying people who had spent years searching for her. The following morning began with a problem so small that most people would have forgotten about it within an hour. Unfortunately for Claire Morgan, that was not how things worked at Westfield Regional Hospital. During a busy shift change, a supply request intended for one department was accidentally routed to another. The issue was corrected almost immediately, and no patient care was affected, but the mistake created an opportunity for criticism. By mid-morning, Claire found herself standing near the nurse's station while Dr. Benjamin Carter reviewed several reports. A handful of employees worked nearby, close enough to hear every word. Carter looked up from the paperwork and frowned. Claire, this request should have been reviewed before submission. Claire accepted the document and examined it. I understand. I will correct the record. It is already corrected, Carter replied. The point is that details matter. Several nurses glanced toward them. Claire nodded politely. You are right. Carter placed the folder on the counter. I hope so. We cannot afford unnecessary mistakes. The conversation lasted less than a minute, but the effect lingered much longer. As Carter walked away, whispers quietly spread through the department. Some employees sympathized with Claire. Others simply saw another example of why the quiet nurse remained overlooked. During lunch, a group of coworkers sat together discussing schedules and upcoming evaluations. Claire entered the cafeteria carrying a small salad and a bottle of water. Before she could sit down, one nurse smiled and said, "Careful, everyone. The hospital's most mysterious employee has arrived." Laughter followed. "Maybe she is secretly running the place," another joked. "That would explain why nobody knows anything about her." More laughter filled the table. Claire smiled politely and chose a seat near the window. She had learned long ago that responding only encouraged the teasing. Most of it was harmless, yet it reminded her that people rarely saw beyond the surface. To them, she was simply the quiet nurse. Nothing more. Later that afternoon, Claire spent nearly an hour helping an elderly patient complete discharge paperwork. The woman seemed nervous about returning home alone after several days in the hospital. Claire patiently answered questions, explained instructions, and arranged follow-up information. Before leaving, the woman squeezed Claire's hand. "You have a gift," she said. "People probably do not tell you that enough." Claire smiled warmly. "Thank you." The word stayed with her throughout the remainder of the shift. By early evening, the emergency department finally began to slow down. Claire gathered her belongings and prepared to leave. As she approached the hospital entrance, she noticed several employees standing near the front windows. Their attention appeared focused on something outside. Curious, Claire glanced toward the parking area. Across the street, several black luxury vehicles sat parked in a neat row. Men wearing dark suits stood nearby, speaking quietly among themselves. None entered the hospital. None appeared threatening. Yet their presence felt unusual enough to attract attention. "Who are they?" one employee asked. "No idea," another replied. Claire watched for a moment before continuing toward her car. She never noticed that one of the suited men briefly looked in her direction before checking a photograph in his hand. Nor did she realize that after years of searching, they had finally found the woman they came to see. The next morning, Westfield Regional Hospital felt strangely different. Nobody could explain why, but an unusual sense of anticipation seemed to hang in the air. Claire Morgan arrived before sunrise as usual, parked her car, and walked into the emergency department carrying a cup of coffee. She greeted the overnight staff, reviewed patient charts, and began preparing for another long shift. To her, it seemed like any other day. She had no idea that people throughout the hospital were about to start talking about her for reasons nobody could have imagined. At approximately 9 o'clock, the first visitor entered the hospital lobby. He was dressed in an expensive dark suit and carried himself with quiet confidence. The receptionist smiled politely. "Good morning. How can I help you?" The man returned the smile. "I am looking for someone." "A patient?" "No." "A physician?" "No." The man paused before asking a simple question. "Does Claire Morgan work here?" The receptionist looked surprised. "Claire Morgan?" "The nurse." "Yes. I believe so." "Thank you." The man nodded politely and stepped aside. Within 15 minutes, 2 more visitors arrived. They were dressed similarly and asked exactly the same question. Soon afterward, several additional men entered the building. None caused any disturbance. None behaved improperly. They simply asked for Claire Morgan. The unusual pattern quickly attracted attention. Receptionists exchanged confused looks. Security personnel quietly discussed the situation. Nurses passing through the lobby began whispering among themselves. Why were so many strangers asking for the same person? More importantly, why were they asking for one of the quietest nurses in the hospital? By lunchtime, curiosity had spread throughout multiple departments. Employees who had barely noticed Claire before suddenly wanted to know everything about her. One nurse approached the emergency department desk. "Claire, do you know several men in suits?" Claire looked up from a patient chart. "No, because they keep asking for you." Claire blinked. "For me? Specifically for you?" Claire frowned. "There must be some mistake." The nurse shrugged. That is what everyone thought. Throughout the afternoon, more visitors arrived. Some waited in the lobby. Others remained outside, near the row of black vehicles parked across the street. Employees frequently glanced through the windows trying to understand what was happening. Dr. Benjamin Carter eventually heard about the situation and decided to investigate personally. As hospital director, he disliked unanswered questions. He walked into the lobby and immediately noticed several well-dressed visitors speaking quietly near the reception desk. "Good afternoon," Carter said. "I am Dr. Benjamin Carter. I understand you have been asking for one of our nurses. One of the men nodded respectfully. Yes, sir. May I ask why? The visitor smiled politely. We have been searching for her for a very long time. Carter folded his arms. And who exactly are you? The man exchanged a glance with his colleagues. Friends of someone who owes her a great debt. The answer only deepened the mystery. Upstairs, Claire continued helping patients completely unaware of the growing speculation surrounding her. Then, shortly before the end of her shift, her pager vibrated. She looked down and read the message. Please report to the administrative conference room immediately. As Claire stared at the screen, a strange feeling settled in her stomach. She could not explain why, but for the first time since the visitors arrived, she had the unmistakable feeling that they were there for her. Claire Morgan stared at the message on her pager for several seconds before slipping it back into her pocket. Administrative conference room. Immediate attendance requested. The wording felt unusually formal. She finished helping her patient, updated the final notes, and quietly made her way through the hospital corridors. Along the way, she noticed something she had never experienced before. People were watching her. Nurses who normally hurried past slowed down as she approached. Technicians glanced up from their workstations. Even a few physicians looked in her direction before whispering to one another. The entire building seemed aware that something unusual was happening. When Claire reached the conference room floor, she immediately noticed several department supervisors standing near the doorway. A group of employees lingered nearby, pretending to organize paperwork, while clearly trying to learn what was going on. The moment Claire appeared, conversation stopped. Confused, she approached the door and gently knocked before entering. The room fell silent. Dr. Benjamin Carter stood at one end of the conference table. Several of the well-dressed visitors sat across from him. The instant Claire stepped inside, every visitor rose to their feet. The reaction surprised everyone. It especially surprised Claire. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then one of the visitors smiled with obvious relief. Miss Morgan? Claire nodded cautiously. Yes. The man exhaled as if a long search had finally ended. We are very grateful to meet you. Claire looked from one face to another. None seemed familiar. I am sorry, she said politely. Have we met before? The visitors exchanged brief glances. Not directly, the oldest among them replied. But someone important has spoken about you for many years. Dr. Carter folded his arms. Perhaps it would help if someone explained why half the hospital suddenly believes this nurse is at the center of a mystery. A faint smile crossed the visitor's face. He reached into a leather folder and carefully removed an old photograph. Then he placed it on the conference table. Claire looked down. Her expression immediately changed. The photograph showed a younger version of herself standing outside a small community clinic years earlier. Memories she had not revisited in a very long time suddenly returned. A quiet night. A worried stranger. A decision she had made without thinking twice. Where did you get this? Claire asked softly. It belonged to the man who asked us to find you. The visitor replied. Around the room, curiosity intensified. Several supervisors leaned closer. Even Dr. Carter seemed unable to hide his interest. Who is this man? He asked. The visitor looked toward Claire before answering. Years ago, Miss Morgan helped someone during one of the most difficult moments of his life. She expected nothing in return and never spoke about it afterward. Claire lowered her eyes. She knew exactly what they were talking about now. You remember, the visitor said gently. Claire nodded. A little. The man smiled. The person you helped never forgot. Then he placed a sealed envelope on the table and carefully pushed it toward her. This letter has been waiting many years to reach your hands. Claire stared at the envelope while the room watched in complete silence. Before she could open it, another visitor checked his phone and smiled. He just arrived, he said quietly. Every eye in the room turned toward him. Who arrived? Dr. Carter asked. The visitor looked toward the doorway. The man who has been searching for Claire Morgan all these years. For several seconds after the visitor spoke, nobody moved. The conference room remained completely silent as every person present tried to process what was happening. Claire Morgan looked down at the sealed envelope resting on the table in front of her. It felt strangely heavy despite weighing almost nothing. Years ago, she would never have imagined that a simple act of kindness could lead to a moment like this. Dr. Benjamin Carter glanced toward the doorway and then back at the visitors. You still have not told us who this person is, he said. The oldest visitor smiled politely. You will understand very soon. Around the room, nurses, supervisors, and administrators exchanged curious looks. The mystery that had consumed the hospital all day only seemed to be growing. Claire slowly picked up the envelope and carefully opened it. Inside was a folded handwritten letter. The paper appeared slightly worn, as if it had been carried for a long time. She unfolded it and began reading. Almost immediately, her expression changed. The words described details that only two people could have remembered. A cold evening many years earlier. A roadside service station outside the city. A frightened stranger who seemed completely alone. Claire felt memories returning one by one. At the time, she had been a nursing student returning home after a volunteer shift. She remembered noticing a man who appeared exhausted and unwell. Most people walked past without stopping. Claire had chosen to help. She had stayed with him, contacted assistance, and remained nearby until professionals arrived. To her, it had never seemed extraordinary. It was simply what she believed a future nurse should do. Yet the letter told a very different story. The writer described that night as a turning point. He wrote that he had been struggling through one of the darkest periods of his life. He wrote that her kindness had restored something he thought he had lost forever. Most surprising of all, he remembered a sentence Claire barely recalled saying, "You matter more than you think you do." Reading those words caused her eyes to widen slightly. She had forgotten them years ago. The person who wrote the letter clearly had not. "You kept this all these years?" Claire asked softly. The visitor nodded. He carried that memory everywhere. Several employees watched in fascination. The quiet nurse they barely noticed suddenly seemed connected to a story nobody could have imagined. One supervisor leaned toward another and whispered, "Why did she never tell anyone?" The answer was simple. Claire never considered herself a hero. She never thought the story belonged to her. Before anyone could say another word, a message appeared on one visitor's phone. He looked down, smiled, and rose to his feet. Instantly, every other visitor stood as well. The movement captured the room's attention. Dr. Carter straightened his posture. The visitors looked toward the conference room entrance with obvious respect. Claire felt her heartbeat quicken. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Calm, measured, confident. The door handle slowly turned. And for the first time, everyone in the room realized they were about to meet the man whose life had been changed by the quiet nurse nobody had truly seen. The door opened, and a distinguished man in his late 50s stepped into the conference room. He wore a tailored dark suit and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to responsibility. The visitors immediately moved aside to make room for him. Every person in the room seemed to recognize that his arrival carried significance. Claire Morgan looked at him carefully. At first, she could not place his face. Time had changed him. The years had added experience, success, and confidence. Yet there was something familiar in his eyes. The man smiled warmly the moment he saw her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he took a slow step forward. "Claire Morgan," he said, "after all these years, it is finally a privilege to thank you in person." The room remained silent. Dr. Benjamin Carter glanced toward the visitors and then back at the newcomer. "May I ask who you are?" The man turned politely toward him. "My name is Anthony Moretti." Several people in the room exchanged surprised looks. The name was widely known throughout the region. Anthony Moretti had become one of the most successful business leaders in the state. His companies employed thousands of people. His charitable foundation funded schools, community centers, and healthcare programs across multiple cities. Yet despite his public reputation, nobody understood why he was standing in a hospital conference room looking at a quiet nurse with such gratitude. Anthony returned his attention to Claire. "You probably do not remember everything about that night," he said gently. Claire nodded. "I remember enough." Anthony smiled. "I hoped you would." He slowly removed a small photograph from his jacket pocket. It was the same photograph she had seen earlier. "For years this remained one of my most valuable possessions." Claire looked at the image again. "I never expected anyone to keep it." Anthony laughed softly. "That is because you never understood what you did for me." He turned toward the others in the room. "Most people believe success comes from money, influence, or opportunity. Sometimes it comes from a single person choosing to care when nobody else does." The room grew even quieter. Anthony explained how, years earlier, he had been traveling alone during a period of immense personal difficulty. He described feeling exhausted, isolated, and uncertain about his future. Then a young nursing student stopped to help a stranger she did not know. She stayed. She listened. She treated him with dignity. She reminded him that his life still had value. She never asked my name, Anthony said. She never asked for anything. When assistance arrived, she simply wished me well and continued on her way. Claire lowered her eyes, slightly embarrassed by the attention. Anthony smiled. I spent years trying to locate her. Every lead disappeared. Every search ended with another dead end. Yet I never forgot the kindness she showed me. Dr. Carter listened carefully, his expression changing with every word. The nurse many people had overlooked suddenly seemed very different. Anthony then reached into his briefcase and placed another item on the table. It was a thick folder. There is one more thing Claire deserves to know, he said. And when everyone hears it, they will finally understand why finding her became one of the most important promises I ever made. Anthony Moretti slowly opened the folder and removed several documents. He placed them carefully on the conference table where everyone could see them. Some were photographs. Others were newspaper articles. A few contained letters from charitable organizations across the state. Claire looked confused. She did not understand what any of it had to do with her. Anthony smiled gently as he noticed her expression. You still do not see it, do you? Claire shook her head. See what? Anthony glanced around the room before answering. The reason I spent years trying to find you. He picked up one of the photographs and held it toward her. The image showed a newly built community center filled with children and families. This center serves more than 3,000 people every year. He placed it down and lifted another photograph. This scholarship program has helped hundreds of students attend college. Then another. This healthcare outreach project provides assistance to families who cannot afford medical services. The room listened carefully. Anthony continued. People often ask why I became so committed to helping others. They assume it was a business decision or a public relations strategy. The truth is much simpler. He looked directly at Claire. It started with you. Silence filled the room. Claire blinked in disbelief. Anthony continued speaking. Years ago, when I felt completely lost, you treated me like a human being when you had absolutely no reason to. You gave your time to a stranger. You offered kindness without expecting recognition. You reminded me that one person can change another person's life simply by caring. Several nurses exchanged emotional glances. Dr. Carter remained completely silent. Anthony slowly folded his hands. After that night, I made a promise to myself. If a stranger could show that level of compassion, then I could spend the rest of my life doing something meaningful with the opportunities one had been given. Claire lowered her eyes. I never knew any of this. Of course you did not, Anthony replied warmly. You never asked for credit. He then revealed something that surprised everyone even more. For years, his foundation had quietly funded healthcare initiatives throughout the region, including several programs that benefited Westfield Regional Hospital. A few administrators immediately recognized the names of the grants he mentioned. Suddenly, the connection became clear. One supervisor looked stunned. Your foundation helped fund our patient assistance program. Anthony nodded. Yes. Another administrator spoke up. And the pediatric outreach initiative. That as well. The room grew increasingly emotional as people realized the scale of what they were hearing. Anthony smiled at Claire. Every major project began with the same question. What would happen if more people treated strangers the way you treated me? Claire felt overwhelmed. She had spent years believing that night was insignificant. Yet the evidence spread across the conference table told a completely different story. Then Anthony reached into the folder one final time and removed a small presentation box. He placed it in front of Claire. I did not come here only to thank you, he said. I came here because there is something the entire hospital deserves to witness. Around the room, anticipation immediately returned. Even Dr. Carter leaned forward slightly. Anthony looked at Claire with sincere gratitude before slowly opening the box, preparing to reveal something that would change how everyone in the hospital saw her forever. The moment the presentation box opened, every person in the conference room leaned forward. Inside rested a beautifully crafted crystal award mounted on a dark wooden base. Its polished surface reflected the overhead lights as Anthony Moretti carefully lifted it from the box. Claire Morgan immediately shook her head. Anthony, I cannot accept that. Anthony smiled. That response is exactly why you deserve it. Soft laughter moved through the room. Anthony turned toward the hospital staff. Several years ago, my foundation established a private recognition program. We intended it for people whose actions create lasting impact without seeking attention. Every year, candidates are nominated from across the country. Hundreds of names have been reviewed. He paused before looking back at Claire. Yet the first person we unanimously selected was someone who never even knew the program existed. The room erupted into surprised whispers. Claire looked completely overwhelmed. There must be people far more deserving. Anthony shook his head. No, there are many successful people. There are many talented people. There are even many generous people. But very few people demonstrate compassion when there is absolutely nothing to gain. The room fell silent again. Anthony carefully handed her the award. This recognition exists because of the lesson you taught me. Claire accepted it reluctantly, still struggling to process everything happening around her. Several nurses began applauding. Others quickly joined. Within seconds, the entire conference room filled with applause. Some employees who had barely spoken to Claire before now looked at her with admiration. Others appeared embarrassed as they remembered their assumptions. Dr. Benjamin Carter remained completely still. Watching the scene unfold, he replayed countless moments from the past year. Every time he overlooked Claire. Every time he underestimated her. Every time he dismissed her quiet nature as a lack of confidence. Anthony eventually raised a hand, and the applause softened. There is one final reason I wanted everyone here today. He turned toward the hospital staff. People often assume extraordinary individuals are easy to identify. They imagine greatness arrives with titles, recognition, or public attention. The truth is very different. He gestured toward Claire. Sometimes the most extraordinary person in a room is the one nobody notices. Those words seemed to affect everyone present. Several nurses lowered their eyes. A few administrators exchanged uncomfortable glances. The message was impossible to ignore. Anthony continued. For years, Claire never told this story. She never used it for personal gain. She never asked for recognition. She simply continued helping people every day. Then he smiled warmly. That is the reason she deserves recognition now. The applause returned, louder than before. Claire stood quietly holding the award while dozens of people celebrated her. Yet despite everything happening around her, she remained the same humble nurse who arrived before sunrise each morning. Finally, Dr. Carter stepped forward. His expression carried none of the authority that usually defined him. Instead, there was genuine humility. He looked directly at Claire and took a slow breath. The room gradually grew quiet once more. Everyone sensed that something important was about to happen. After a long pause, Dr. Carter spoke. Claire, there is something I need to say in front of everyone. The conference room became completely silent after Dr. Benjamin Carter spoke. Every eye turned toward him. For years, he had been the most authoritative voice in the hospital. He was respected, influential, and rarely admitted mistakes publicly. Yet as he looked at Claire Morgan standing quietly with the award in her hands, there was no trace of authority in his expression. Only honesty. Claire, he began, I owe you an apology. The room remained silent. Carter continued. Over the past year, I evaluated you based on what I thought I saw. I looked at your experience level. I looked at your quiet personality. I looked at your position within the hospital. What I failed to see was your character. Claire immediately shook her head. Doctor, that is not necessary. Yes, Carter replied gently. It is. He took a slow breath. A leader should recognize value in people. I did not do that. I underestimated you. Several employees lowered their eyes. They knew the same words applied to them as well. Carter continued. Today I learned something important. The qualities that matter most are often the easiest to overlook. He looked directly at Claire. Thank you for reminding all of us of that. The room erupted into applause once again. This time, however, the applause felt different. It was not simply admiration. It was respect. Genuine respect earned through years of quiet service. One by one, several nurses approached Claire. Some thanked her for helping them during difficult shifts. Others admitted they had judged her unfairly. A few even apologized for jokes they had made in the past. Claire responded to each person exactly the same way she always had, with kindness. Anthony Moretti watched the scene with a satisfied smile. The recognition he had hoped to give Claire was finally happening, not because of wealth or influence, but because people were finally seeing the person she had always been. After some time, Anthony checked his watch and realized he needed to leave. He walked toward Claire and extended his hand. Claire accepted it, But Anthony surprised her by gently placing both hands over hers. "You changed more lives than you realize," he said. "Not because of one moment, but because you never stopped being the person you were that night." Claire smiled. "I think you have given me far too much credit." Anthony laughed softly. "And I think you still do not understand how remarkable you are." The room shared a warm laugh. A few minutes later, Anthony and his associates departed the hospital. Employees gathered near the windows as the vehicles slowly pulled away. Yet even after they disappeared from view, something inside Westfield Regional Hospital had changed. In the days that followed, people treated Claire differently. Doctors listened more carefully when she spoke. Supervisors respected her opinions. Nurses sought her advice. But the most remarkable thing was that Claire herself never changed. The following Monday, she arrived before sunrise exactly as she always had. She prepared patient charts, organized supplies, helped families, comforted nervous patients. There were no cameras, no speeches, no awards ceremony, just another ordinary shift. As she walked through the emergency department, an elderly patient smiled and thanked her for her kindness. Claire smiled back and continued working, because that was who she had always been. And as the morning sunlight filled the hospital corridors, everyone who knew her finally understood a lesson they would never forget. True greatness is rarely found in the loudest person in the room. Sometimes it belongs to the quiet nurse nobody noticed until the world finally showed up to thank her. As the day came to a close and the respect she had earned finally stood in the open for everyone to see, there was a quiet reminder that some of the strongest people in the world are often the ones nobody notices at first. Stories like this are not really about titles, uniforms, wealth, or status. They are about character. They are about the people who keep showing up, keep doing the right thing, and keep helping others even when nobody is watching. If you stayed with us until the end of this journey, thank you. Your time, your support, and your presence mean more than words can express. Every view, every comment, every shared story helps this community continue to grow. Here on The Hidden Nurse, we celebrate the overlooked heroes, the underestimated women, the quiet professionals, and the extraordinary people whose true value is often hidden beneath ordinary appearances. Our stories are built around courage, resilience, sacrifice, second chances, and those unforgettable moments when the truth finally comes to light. If you enjoy stories where kindness is stronger than arrogance, where perseverance overcomes doubt, and where hidden strength earns the recognition it deserves, then you are in the right place. The Hidden Nurse is a place for viewers who believe that integrity matters, that compassion matters, and that the people who quietly carry the heaviest burdens deserve to be seen. We are grateful for every member of this growing audience from across America and around the world. Your encouragement inspires us to continue bringing you powerful stories filled with emotion, hope, determination, and unforgettable moments of recognition. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It is a simple action that makes a tremendous difference and helps us continue creating more stories for viewers like you. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a future story from The Hidden Nurse. We would also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from and share what part of this story stayed with you the most. Thank you once again for listening, for supporting the channel, and for being part of this incredible community. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of the people around you, and never underestimate the quiet person in the room. Sometimes they are carrying a story the world has not discovered yet.